There's a coffee stain on the back page of my notebook from the day I didn't cry in the bathroom stall. That's how I mark time now, not by wins or promotions, but by small, quiet survivals. I'm the kind of woman who doesn't raise her voice in meetings, who knows the difference between being right and being kept around. I'm 32, an analyst in a glass office where perception outweighs skill, and most days I feel like wallpaper with a brain. Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Sophia Cobb from Los Angeles. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I live alone. No cat. No plants. Just me and a stack of project folders I can't seem to throw out, like if I keep them long enough someone will finally say you did this. We see you. My friends tell me I should ask for more, speak up more. But those people don't know what it's like to have your ideas echoed back at you, in a deeper voice with a smile that wins rooms. I stopped dreaming out loud 5 years ago. Now I just build things that can't be ignored. Like the pitch. The one I spent 6 months on. Late nights in that sterile corner of the office with humming lights and a broken heater. Stacking data models and reshaping trends into something elegant, bulletproof, undeniable. It was supposed to be my shot. A strategy to land the company's biggest tech client yet. My manager said it could fast-track me to director. I started dreaming about that title. Director. Tasted like finally. Greg was supposed to help polish the deck, not steal it. But somehow the day of the presentation my name was gone. Replaced with his. He walked in wearing a $700 suit. And that easy, golden boy confidence like he was born under fluorescent lights and applause. He delivered my pitch word for word, like he was telling a story he wrote in his bones. Nobody questioned it. They loved him. Brilliant work, Greg. Incredible vision, Greg. Where do you find these ideas? I stood in the back of the conference room pretending to take notes, rage clawing under my skin like something feral. He didn't even glance at me. And after, when I finally cornered him near the elevators, all he said was, "Hey, I figured we were a team. What's mine is yours, right?" No apology. No shame. Just a smirk and a tap on my arm like we were buddies. Then he walked away. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my apartment floor with my laptop open and reread the deck like I was reading my own diary, now smeared with someone else's fingerprints. I'd saved a version with timestamps, of course I had. I was always the organized one, the detail person. But when I brought it to my manager the next day, he glanced at it like it was a minor clerical mistake. Said Greg had just streamlined my concept. That the essence was still mine. Whatever that meant. He offered me 2 extra comp days and an Amazon gift card. I cashed in the days. Never used the gift card. I didn't want to be pacified. I wanted Greg to feel what it was like to be erased in plain sight. I started watching him differently after that. Not with jealousy, with precision. Because if they all wanted Greg to be the face of the company, if they were so hungry to believe in the myth of him, I'd let them. But myths collapse fast when you tamper with the foundation. So I started building something. Not a plan. Not yet. Just possibilities. Small thoughts in the back of my mind. A question. What if the golden boy got handed a grenade and didn't realize the pin was already gone? I didn't confront Greg again. I didn't tell anyone in HR or send a carefully worded follow-up email with proof of my original file. That would have been easy to ignore. Just another bitter woman protecting her ego. Instead, I did the one thing no one expects from a woman like me. I started smiling. Not real ones. Polished, pacifying smiles. The kind that fit neatly into office culture like paperclips or bland birthday cakes. I showed up early. I volunteered for overflow work. I praised Greg in meetings. And beneath it all, I started erasing myself, deliberately, quietly. Because absence creates hunger, and I needed them starving by the time I came back. My desk became a shrine to neutrality. Soft colors. Neat stacks. Nothing too personal, nothing too emotional. I wanted to look like someone forgettable but functional, the opposite of a threat. Meanwhile, Greg kept climbing. One of his pitches got picked up by the CMO. He was added to 2 strategic accounts. The interns started asking him for advice. He wore louder suits, made worse jokes, and leaned harder into the role of office darling. I watched him glide through that fantasy with all the confidence of someone who never questioned whether he belonged. I watched and I took notes. Not on paper. In my head. Every oversight. Every assumption. Every time he forgot where the source data came from. I was storing it all. 3 weeks after the stolen pitch, Greg was tapped to lead the preliminary research for an upcoming client presentation. Another big fish, even bigger than the last. He looped me in automatically. "You've got a great eye for details," he said. I said thank you. I smiled. I nodded. And then I offered to take on the initial data modeling, just to lighten his load. He looked relieved. Of course he did. People like Greg never suspect the quiet ones, especially not after they've won. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened a blank spreadsheet. I stared at the empty cells for a long time, listening to the radiator rattle like it was daring me to follow through. Then I started typing. I built fake metrics, numbers that looked plausible, even impressive, but told a completely false story. I layered them with made-up growth curves, hyper-targeted demographics, inflated engagement rates. Then I cross-referenced them with industry jargon, so nothing would trip a surface-level glance. By morning it looked like a goldmine, a dream pitch, and no one but me would know it was poison. I didn't just fake data, I built a whole false ecosystem. I created fake client personas, fabricated market analysis, wrote up internal memos from non-existent contractors praising our direction. I registered a throwaway email to confirm a fictional focus group's feedback. Everything tied together. Everything was clean. I worked on it during off hours, logging in through a private VPN, saving drafts on encrypted drives. I was methodical, surgical, but most of all I was calm. Rage had no place here anymore. This was about precision. In meetings, I let Greg present pieces of the research as if they were his own. I pretended to be impressed. Occasionally, I even asked him to explain parts of it to me, feeding his ego just enough to dull his instincts. It worked. He stopped questioning the numbers altogether. "We've got something special here," he told the leadership team one Friday. They agreed. Everyone did. Except me. I knew we had a loaded gun and no safety. I started taking PTO in small doses. Mental health days. Doctor appointments. Long weekends. The kind of absences no one questions because they're draped in polite vagueness. But really, I was training them to operate without me, making sure Greg felt comfortable leading solo. That was the most important part. He had to believe this was his idea. His baby. Because when it all collapsed, it needed to collapse on him. By the end of the second month, the fake pitch was finalized. Slideshow notes, talking points. I packaged it perfectly and handed it over like a gift. Greg barely glanced through it before forwarding it to the exec team. "She's a machine," he said in a meeting, and everyone laughed. I laughed too. They had no idea they were about to watch their golden boy walk into a spotlight made of gasoline. The first time I lied to Greg outright, it surprised me how easy it was. He stopped by my desk holding a printout of one of the charts I doctored and asked, "You double-checked this, right?" I didn't blink. "Triple-checked," I said. He smiled, thanked me, and walked away like we were still the same team we never really were. That moment changed everything. Because it wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about clarity. I'd been on mute so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to shape a narrative. Not with honesty. Not with permission. But with control. By now the pitch had grown into a full campaign proposal. Complete with projected outcomes, market expansion strategies, and a rollout plan that looked so real it scared me sometimes. I kept having intrusive thoughts about what would happen if it somehow worked. If Greg landed the client, and I watched him take a victory lap off a story I wrote in lies. But I knew that wouldn't happen. I built in the flaw points intentionally. Numbers that couldn't be defended under audit. A key demographic stat that contradicted our prior campaigns. A research citation that traced back to a dead link. I didn't want him to fall on a single mistake. I wanted the whole thing to unravel in layers publicly, so that by the time the truth surfaced, the damage would be irreversible. Still, doubt crept in late at night. What if someone else spotted the flaws before he presented? What if they brought in an external consultant who flagged the data? What if they didn't believe it was Greg's fault? Those thoughts haunted me for exactly 2 nights before I remembered how often people believe the face they already trust. No one would second-guess Greg, not until it was too late. So I doubled down. I started planting reinforcement. a fake LinkedIn profile of a consumer insights consultant who appeared in a few internal emails to confirm our direction. I mocked up PDFs of research reports from a shell firm with a convincing name and logo. I left subtle references in emails, enough to look organic but not suspicious. I even created an anonymous survey on the company's intranet showing strong internal support for the pitch direction, then seeded it to a few departments. People saw what they expected to see. That's the thing about confidence. It's contagious right up until it becomes a noose. Greg grew bolder. He started dropping lines from the pitch in casual conversation, testing them out on executives like they were his own ideas. "We're not just selling a product," he told one of the VPs. "We're reshaping the way our clients think about digital engagement." That was my line, word for word. I smiled when I heard it come out of his mouth, because he didn't even know he was quoting me. He was just a vessel now, a pretty puppet with a grenade in his chest. I kept my distance publicly, turned down invites to meetings I should have been in, played the part of the supportive but tired team member. "I'm just here to help," I'd say, and they'd nod distracted, already looking toward Greg. He brought energy, vision, a track record. That's how they saw it. And I let them. The week before the presentation, Greg asked me to do one final review of the deck. "You've got the best eyes on this," he said, and handed me a hard copy like it was sacred. I took it home, locked my door, and went over every slide with a red pen, not to fix but to flaw. I added one last touch, a slide with a quote from a supposed industry leader praising our approach. The name I used, a real person, but the quote, completely fabricated. And if they checked, it would take 20 seconds to confirm it was fake. That night, as I sat back and looked at the final version, I felt nothing. Not triumph. Not guilt. Just a stillness I hadn't known in years. I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. I was watching. 2 days before the pitch, I handed everything over. Greg was nervous, excited, amped on his own brilliance. "You killed it," he told me, and gave me one of those half hugs that men like him think mean something. I smiled and thanked him. Then I filed for PTO. My manager stopped by my desk that afternoon. "Everything good?" he asked, too late to matter. I told him I needed space. "Mental reset," I said. "Just for a week." He nodded. Of course he did. After all, Greg had everything under control. They always think we break when we go quiet. What they don't see is what we build in silence. I didn't watch the presentation live. That would have been indulgent. Emotional. And this wasn't about emotion anymore, it was about distance. Control. Timing. I wanted the story to reach me secondhand, warped by shock, stripped of spin. So instead of logging into the live stream, I went to the bookstore near my apartment, bought a cheap paperback, and sat at the cafe window with my phone on silent. I turned off Slack, closed my email, let the world do what it would. The presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. Greg in front of the company's top brass, the client's executive team, and the regional directors from 3 markets. This wasn't just a pitch. It was a performance, a proving ground. If it landed, he'd be on a flight to New York by the end of the week, shaking hands with the global team. If it failed, if even one slide cracked, it wouldn't be salvageable. At 10:03 my phone buzzed. A single text from one of the newer analysts, someone who'd always looked at me like I was invisible until she needed something formatted. It said, "What happened? Greg's leaving the room." CEO looked pissed. I locked my phone, finished my coffee, and walked home in the slow, deliberate way you do when a thunderstorm's building, but hasn't yet cracked. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just listened, to the stillness of the sidewalks, to my breath, to the sound of something irreversible setting in motion behind me. By noon the messages started. Slack pings. Missed calls. A frantic-sounding voicemail from my manager. "Hey, when you're back, we really need to touch base. Something's not aligning with the numbers in Greg's deck. Can you, just give me a call?" I didn't. Instead, I logged into my inbox, read through the thread that had started forming. The subject line said urgent. Data sources for client pitch. The body was a mess of panicked questions and finger-pointing. One exec asked if a particular chart had been verified externally. Another replied that the reference link was dead. The CEO chimed in asking who had last touched the data. Greg's reply was short. I was told all data came vetted from protagonist's name. He threw me under the bus. Of course he did. But the timing was wrong, because I'd already submitted my formal PTO request 2 days prior, and it was documented in the system. I hadn't touched a file or sent a message since then. Greg had full control of the final deck, and the audit trail already showed that. I'd made sure of it. By late afternoon, the storm had a name. An emergency internal review was launched. The client was pausing the engagement. And Greg? Greg was nowhere on Slack. I imagine someone had pulled him into a conference room by then, the kind with no windows and no polite laughter, where the air shifts and every compliment you've ever been given starts to rot in your throat. I got a call that night from a friend in finance. She didn't ask questions. Just said, "You might want to stay off the radar this week." I thanked her. She hesitated, then added, "I'm not saying I know anything, but if you did this, just know, some of us were watching." We knew. That night, I played the presentation from the recording portal, watched Greg stand in front of 30 people, explaining projections that didn't exist, quoting sources that had never published anything, walking them through growth numbers that contradicted our actual quarterly reports. Around the 13-minute mark, the CEO raised his hand. "Greg," he said, "this data suggests a 420% conversion jump in an untested market. That's unprecedented. Where exactly did this come from?" Greg blinked, smiled, fumbled. He said my name, said I ran the numbers, said he assumed that I'd cross-checked everything. There was silence. Then someone pulled out a tablet and checked the links. The fake PDF, the fabricated consultant quote, the broken source. By 20 minutes in, Greg's voice cracked. He stopped clicking. You could see the sweat spreading at the collar. The deck stuttered. The CEO leaned back with a look I'd seen before. After the last round of layoffs, when someone made a fatal misstep and didn't even know they were bleeding yet. I closed the laptop. That was enough. I wasn't interested in watching him break. I just needed to know it had started, that the myth was unraveling from the inside. I slept hard that night. Dreamless. Heavy. Clean. The email came in at 7:42 a.m. 2 days after the presentation. Subject line: Internal review request urgent. It was from legal. Polite but firm. They were launching a formal audit into the data presented during the client pitch, and had flagged me as a key contributor. They asked for access to my files, my revision history, and any communications I'd had with Greg in the 30 days leading up to the event. I didn't respond right away. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, reading the message again and again. Not out of fear, but to make sure I felt what I was supposed to feel. Nothing. Not nerves, not guilt. Just the steady confirmation that every breadcrumb I'd left behind had led exactly here. When I finally wrote back, I kept it simple. Thank you for reaching out. I've been on PTO since date. I did not review or approve the final deck. Happy to cooperate fully. I attached my PTO approval, my Slack logs, my calendar receipts, everything that proved indisputably that Greg had been the last to touch the knife. Then I turned off my phone and left the apartment. I needed air. I needed space. But mostly I needed to not hover. I'd already done the work. The storm had reached its eye. Back at the office, Greg was unraveling. I got the story in pieces. A whispered update from a coworker I barely spoke to. A forwarded email from someone who still owed me a favor. Greg had spent the morning pacing between his desk and the CFO's office, arguing that the numbers must have been switched, or that someone had altered the files after submission. At one point, he claimed the client data was sent to him directly, and that he assumed it was cleared. But assumptions don't stand up in audits. And the audit trail was clear. By the end of the week, the findings were formalized. The report was shared with the senior leadership team. The client withdrew completely, citing inconsistencies and a breach of internal confidence. Greg was suspended without pay pending final review. I wasn't mentioned once. Not in the report, not in the meetings, not in the follow-up emails. I wasn't cleared. I was invisible. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Then came the call. Not from HR. Not from legal. From Greg. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. You set me up, he said.
No hello. No hesitasten.
His voice was frayed at the edges, a silk thread pulled too far. You planted that shit. I know you did. I didn't respond. He went on. You think you're clever? You think they won't find out? You're not clean in this. Still I said nothing. He cursed. Laughed bitterly. I should have known. You never said a damn thing. Just smiled like you were stupid. Like you didn't know how this game worked. That's when I spoke. I knew exactly how it worked. I just stopped playing it with rules written by you. Silence. Then he said, I'll take you down with me. I almost laughed. Not because it wasn't a threat, but because it was too late. He didn't realize he wasn't dragging me into the fire. He was already choking in the smoke I'd lit weeks ago. I ended the call with one word. Goodbye. The following Monday, a company-wide email was sent out. No details, just a sterile announcement that Greg would be pursuing new opportunities, and that his accounts would be redistributed. His desk was cleared that same morning. I watched it happen over Zoom. The IT guy boxed up his belongings.
No ceremony.
No thank you cake. Just absence. Later that day my manager called. I just want to check in, he said, voice careful, like he was talking to a wire he didn't want to trip. This situation's been complicated. Has it? I asked flat. He exhaled. Look, I know Greg leaned on you a lot. If you ever want to talk about what really happened, I'm here. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I said, you were there when he took the credit, remember? You watched him take it. So did everyone else. Funny how none of you asked questions then. He didn't respond. I didn't fill the silence. Anyway, I added, I've submitted my resignation. Effective immediately. You'll find my final handoffs in the shared folder. That broke him out of his pause. You're leaving. Yes. But after everything, don't you want to stay? Greg's gone. This could be a new start for you. It is, I said. Just not here. And with that I signed off. No goodbye email.
No final lance. No lingering sentiment.
I walked out like a shadow, leaving a room where the lights had finally burned out. I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no smug Instagram post, no whispered confession to anyone who might turn my silence into gossip. Revenge isn't loud. Not the kind that works. The kind that sticks. The kind that frees you. What I did to Greg wasn't about spectacle. It was about symmetry. He stole something he didn't earn. I handed him something he didn't deserve. And now we were even. Except I was free and he was nowhere. The weeks that followed were disorienting in their calm. I stayed offline. Let emails go unanswered. Deleted Slack. It felt like washing someone else's fingerprints off my skin. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up with a deadline pushing down on my chest. I stopped measuring my worth by how much of myself I could subtract to make someone else look competent. I wasn't building anyone's dream anymore. 3 weeks after I walked out, I got a letter in the mail, actual mail. White envelope. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of printer paper with 2 sentences typed in 11-point Arial. You really think no one's going to trace this back to you? You think you're untouchable? There was no name.
No signature.
Just anger. I read it once. Then I tore it in half, tossed it in the trash and went back to making my tea. The water was just beginning to boil. I didn't need proof it was from Greg. The tone was his tell. That puffed up mixture of fear and deflection. What he didn't know was that I'd already moved past him. He was still fighting a war I'd already won, and walked away from. Later that week, I took a walk to a part of the city I'd avoided for months. Downtown, near the office. I passed the building on purpose, saw the glass doors where Greg used to hold court in the lobby, shaking hands like he was already a VP. He was gone now. I was a ghost walking past a theater that had already gone dark. And yet, one thing stuck with me. Something I hadn't planned for. Not regret. Not fear. Something quieter. A thought. How many other people like me are still in there? Still silencing themselves? Still passing their work to men with louder voices and shorter resumes? That stayed with me. So I started something small. A consulting collective. All women. No hierarchy. Just real strategy work, clean contracts, equal credit. It was quiet at first. A few clients. A few wins. But word spread faster than I expected. One of our first big accounts, the same tech client Greg tanked. They reached out directly, said they were looking for a fresh start. We signed the contract last week. My name is on every slide now. Sometimes late at night I open my old work laptop. I scroll through old emails, saved drafts, calendar invites where I was the organizer but not the speaker. I look at how many times I handed over brilliance like it was background noise. And then I close it and smile, not because it's funny. Because I don't owe anyone silence anymore. I never had to scream to be heard. I just had to make sure that when they finally listened, they couldn't unhear it. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or had your work stolen, this story was for you. Subscribe for more quiet, calculated revenge stories where power is reclaimed without screaming, and justice comes dressed in silence. New stories drop daily, stay tuned.